Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about how to properly set the bearing adjustment on your spindle for 8K and down axles. We're going to cover the different types of nuts, the different types of retainers, and how to properly adjust that if you're doing a bearing pack, or if you're for any reason taking the hub off, or if you just need to check the slack on your bearings. So stick with us. We're going to jump right into it, and we're going to see if we can learn something today. So we have a brand new 3,500 pound Dexter axle. It's never been installed. We're going to open it up just to show you what the factory adjustment would look like. So if you're doing a tear down, kind of what to expect. We'll show you the type of retainer that's being used in here, and then we're going to cover all the other types of retainer. This retainer that's going to be in here is going to be the most common seen today on later model trailers. Then we'll cover second to that, and then we'll go back many years back to when I started packing bearings. Even in the automotive industry, they use the same type setup. So let's pop the cap off of this and see what's on the inside. And before you say anything or comment, I am going to ruin this cap. I do that on purpose because we do not reuse caps. If we pull the cap, we put it in the trash and we put a new one on it. Not being wasteful, it's just these caps are not thick, they're pretty thin, and they're prone to come off if you reinstall them, in my opinion. So we try to put a brand new one on there so we don't have any trouble. So I'm gonna put that in the trash. If you look here, try to wipe some of this grease away. This is also an easy lube setup, which that does make a little bit of difference, and we'll talk about that here shortly. And it uses a jam nut with a retainer. Some people call this retainer a spider, golden spider, and you'll see that once we pull it off. But I'm gonna try to carefully pull the retainer off so you can see kind of the slack that's gonna be on the jam nut before we pull it off of the hub. So we'll pop the retainer off, and I'm gonna try not to move the nut from where it's at from the factory setting, just so you can see it. And that's why they call it a spider. It's got some little legs that retain the nut. It does have this little tang that goes on the D-shaped spindle to hold it into place. Let's get that out of the way. Now let's take a look at the nut. Like I said, I haven't moved anything. Not gonna use a wrench. I'm gonna see if I can take it loose with my fingers. So if you see that, you may think that's too loose, but that's exactly where it needs to be on there. We're gonna show how to reinstall this jam nut retainer style setup with an easy lube axle. We're going to cover that, and then we'll move on to some other axles. So it is supposed to be loose. You should be able to take it off all the way. Now if you get it to here and it has some junk on it, you may have to use a tool to take that off. So we're going to go ahead and pull this all the way off. Then in behind that will be the D-style washer. Do you have to replace these every time you take them off? The short answer on that is no. If the washer is in good shape, if the jam nut is in good shape, and even if the retainer is in good shape, you can clean those up and reinstall them. For me, I always replace the retainer. It's not that expensive because I don't know the whole history of the axle. So just for something that costs anywhere from $3 to $7, I'm not going to gamble. I'm going to put a new retainer in, but I will usually use the nut, the jam nut, and the washer, unless the washer just has some wear on it. Then I'm going to replace those as well. But I just sleep a little better night knowing that I have a new retainer on it. A question that I get asked a lot is, do you have to use a torque wrench in order to properly tighten these down? You can use a torque wrench if you want to. I will give you those torque specs for all of these different setups, but I'll also give you the most common way it's done and what is allowable from the factory. Like I said, we are talking specifically about Dexter on this, but it will relate to most axles. If you have a different brand, I would recommend that you maybe do a search on that for your brand of axle to make sure that this information lines up with your axle manufacturer if it differs from the Dexter. So we'll put the washer back on, and the torque spec for easy lube with the new style jam nut, or the jam nut with the new style retainer, is 50 foot-pounds, or approximately 50 foot-pounds, as it will say in the service manual. It will also tell you can use a 12-inch wrench or a pair of pliers, which most people are going to use. I really do like using a socket. We'll use that a lot. I'm going to show you with a pair of channel locks, as most people are going to have these laying around. So we're going to reinstall that. And again, this is for easy lube setup with the new style nut retainer, which they've been using this for several years. So I'm going to get it close And then as I tighten, we're going to spin the hub. And you want to get it tight. So you full force of hand pressure. If you're a big guy and you're going to gorilla wrench it, don't over tighten it. When this is jammed all the way down, you should still be able to move the bearing. It should not be super loose, but it should not be bound up. If it's bound up, you've got a problem. Something's wrong with the bearing. There's something wrong with the install. Maybe you've changed the races and you didn't want to seat it in properly. So stop at that point. If it binds up, do a full tear down and figure out what you've got going on, because it should not do that. So this would need to be done anytime this hub comes off, or say you've got some miles on it and you feel a little bit of play in the hub, you can jack that up and you can loosen it up and reset it, just so you have proper adjustment, so you don't prematurely wear the bearings out. This is the most common mistake I see by some shops and DIYers. They will either over tighten or under tighten the nut, and will just cause your bearings to prematurely wear out. Now that we've got the nut approximately 50 foot-pounds, so we're going to relieve the torque on it without spinning the hub. Whether this is a brake drum or an idler, it's the same. Just loosen it up. Once you've taken the torque off, and for an easy lube with the new style, the torque spec now is to finger tighten it. That's it. Then you put your retainer back on. So once you go to put the retainer on, it only will go on one way. If it does not line up, they do give you an allowance to back the nut off 1/12 of a turn, which is not much, but it shouldn't take much the way this clips on. So we're going to see if we can get it right here. And that's it. So this is properly tightened, approximately 50 foot-pounds. Back it off, the finger tight, then put your nut retainer on, then it's ready to receive the cap. And you're about ready to put the tire back on and get on down the road. So now we're going to get a different setup that's going to be a very common setup as well. That's going to be on older models, but it covers many years worth of treader axles and treaders. So let me pull this off and we'll get the other one mocked up. So this is going to be a standard grease axle using a castle nut and cotter key. So this is a mock-up because I didn't have a new one in stock, so I just got the cotter key slid in there. But this would be the tear down procedure, and then your washer directly behind that. So the way this would work, once you do a tear down similar to the other one, you're going to put your castle nut back on. The torque spec on this again is going to be 50 foot-pounds or approximately 50 foot-pounds. I'm going to show you the way the service manual explains how to do it. Then I'm going to show you the way I was taught many years ago. So again, we're going to rotate the spindle or rotate the hub, and then we're going to tighten the nut to full bottom out. This is going to be a little tight because I have no grease in here. I'm just doing it for demonstration purposes. Then we're going to loosen the nut up, and then we're going to finger tighten it without moving the spindle. And you want to loosen the nut up to the first slot to get a cotter key in it, which should be right there. Insert your cotter key, bend it over, and the nut should have some play in it. The only thing that should hold the nut in place is the cotter key. That's why it's super important to put the cotter key in. If you see my repack videos, which we'll leave a link in the description, I like to bend the long tab up, then I snip the other one off. I don't like to bend both of them up. That way it does have a stick out on both sides. And that's really it. Very similar to the Easy Lube, you're just using a castle nut here. They do make some castle nuts with more castellations in it. It's still gonna be the same concept on that, whether you have a lot or if you just have the minimal amount. So I'm gonna show you the way I was taught to do it back, early 90s when I was young in the automotive side of it. So we would loosen the nut up, we would spin it to get it tightened, and then we would loosen it all the way. And I'll even show this in some of my videos, and this is how a lot of people still do it. Then we're going to tighten it up again all the way. Then we're going to come out about 1/4 to 3/8 of a turn. And you can still see the nut is loose. So it's the same as finger tight. I'm going to show that one more time. So we would tighten it up while spinning it, then torque off, then back to torque, and then off approximately 1/4 to 3/8 of a turn. If you put the cotter key in there, you still see the nut is moving. Still has place. So there's nothing holding the nut in place except for the cotter key. So whether it's easy lube or standard grease, kind of the same concept on this, 50 foot-pounds if you do want to use a torque wrench, or you can use a pair of pliers, a pair of adjustable pliers like this, or socket. I really like using this method. It's a little easier to grab the nut. So I'm going to tear this down, and then I'm going to set up a different setup on this. That being said, whatever setup you currently have, whether you have cotter key, nut retainer, don't mix those. If you have this setup, do not go to something different. Stick with what you have. Some will interchange, but most won't. So don't change your setup that you have. If you don't do that, then you won't have to worry about making a mistake and potentially causing a hub and wheel loss. So we have one more style retainer that uses a castle nut and a tang style washer. You're really going to see this and then through the 90s, early 2000 on a lot of the easy lube style axles. The way to get that off, you just have to bend this down. I don't know if the camera's going to show that up or not. It's going to have two little tabs on there that will bend up. Depending on the age of the trailer, sometimes it's a little hard to get it off. This is going to be easier because we have it mocked up. So sometimes these can be a little ornery to get off. Just make sure you push the tab down as far as you can. You may even have to take a hammer with your screwdriver or punch to flatten it out as much as possible. So this is not used today, but there's still enough older trailers out there that you'll still run into it. And that is what it looks like. Gives you two options. And the way this would install, once you do your reassembly, you'll put your washer in. You're going to tighten your castle nut up just like you would on the other procedures. And go all the way to full tight, back it off, then finger tight, then just bend one of those tabs. Whenever you come to your first slot, when backing it off, just either tab, whichever one lines up, just bend one tab all the way up, and then you're ready to go. So we have one other style retainer that you really don't see hardly ever anymore, except for in the marine industry. You still see that occasionally, and it's going to fit two different applications in the marine industry. So I'm going to get it real quick. I don't actually have the right spindle, but I'm going to show you the parts on a spindle, show you kind of how it goes, and explain to you how to tighten it, because it is going to be a little different than the other three applications. So let me grab that and we'll be right back. So the last style retainer we're going to use today is going to be this dude. You will see this in the automotive industry. You'll see it several years in the trailer and the marine trailer industry. I don't have the exact setup, but I'm going to give you the concept, show you how to tighten it, because it is a little different. It is going to use a jam nut style. It's going to be much smaller than this jam nut, but I don't have one available, so I'm just going to give you the concept. So the way it would work, as you tighten the nut up while spinning the hub, you're going to go to 30 foot-pounds approximately on tightening it instead of 50 on the rest. You're going to 30 foot-pounds, and then you're going to make sure that the hub is stationary, and you want to back it off with your channel locks until you feel it go to zero load. So you got to be very careful. If you do a big full spin, then start the process over. You want to go from tight with the channel locks or your socket, whatever you're using. So say you're tight, you want to just come back until you feel the slack come off of it. Once that happens, this is where it's different. So now you're going to take that and you're going to spin the hub and tighten the nut finger tight while spinning the hub. You will feel it grab. Once it does that, you're ready to put this style retainer on. You will put that on, then it will have a cotter key that goes through it. You only want to back this up minimally. A lot of times you can just spin this until it lines up. If you have to back it up a bunch, you need to check your install to make sure that's correct. So 30 foot-pounds, back it off, and then spin, rotate the hub until it becomes finger tight, then install this. The only variance of this, if this is an easy lube setup, which you will see this with this style, if it is an easy lube setup, you're going to reassemble the same as you would the easy lube application that we showed in this video towards the beginning of the video. You won't see this a lot, but I thought it was worth mentioning. I usually only see them in the marine application today, and I see them both easy lube setup, and I see them both just standard grease on there. So there is a little bit of difference. So just make sure you understand which one it is. If there's any question about it, try to find out the manufacturer of your axle. You can Google it. You can watch our videos. You can watch other videos. Just again, do your homework. And like I said, I was trained a little bit differently, but the way I do it, it still comes out the same as doing the finger tighten method. I was fortunate enough to be trained by some old school guys. I grew up around a bunch of the old school dudes, and I really learned a lot. I upped my vocabulary game from them that I don't use much of today, but the knowledge that those guys gave me was awesome, and I try not to take that for granted. So hopefully you'll learn something from this. Hopefully this will help you out doing your bearing maintenance. If you do have a breakdown, or if you're just going to tackle a bearing pack on your own, it'll give you a better understanding of how to get the proper adjustment and everything, so you don't wear your bearings out. Be sure to check the description. We'll leave some links to our other videos to do with bearing pack, other stuff associated with this. We will cover larger axles in a different video, 10K and up. It is a little bit different on that, but just be sure to check out our link in the description. We'll leave some of these parts. That way, if you need some replacements, like I said, I always replace these too if I can. Unless they just look brand new, I want to put a new one on there because there's not much to it. And we are going to wrap this up, and we will see you on the next one.